Another example that I did in this evaluation criteria, and this was actually in 1995, I came up with this one. This was at Caterpillar, actually. I came up with this because I was teaching technical writing at Caterpillar. I had I had to train all these technical writers, 150 technical writers at Caterpillar in one building. Um, there was one person off site, but all the rest of them were in that building on the first floor. And I had to teach all the technical translators too. And so I had to convince all the managers to actually let me do these courses and to give some objective based kind of criteria to actually to grade them, right? And that went through all kinds of things. Um, it was my first job in the industry, but I had taught for 10 years, in language and stuff. So it wasn't like I wasn't, inexperienced in this. But I was just teaching technical writing rather than to native speakers rather than teaching to, language to non-native speakers. And so what I did is I came up with a kind of an evaluation. You got to be really, really careful. Really, really careful when you're doing any kind of survey. And I see a lot of mistakes done in these surveys of how you do when you do surveys and do, evaluations. Today, it's amazing how you see these things and what I did was I made sure that when I was doing this, I bet you I've got some of the copies of those things. I should pull them out. See if I got them in my. I've got copies of some of those examples I had, where I carefully did all the questions. It was a range from 1 to 5, if I remember correctly. Okay, I don't think I did 1 to 10. We debated this whole thing. We debated this in management meetings. Okay, whether I do 1 to 5, 1 to 10. It's amazing how much time went through this stuff. But people that don't actually do this, but they want to have their say in it, right? But they do evaluate their employees on things. But this is language. This is a whole different thing, right? Um, and so I remember doing this, but I had to make sure that all the questions were building up. I couldn't have too many questions, and I had to do it. It was all about language and grammar, and I had to evaluate their skills on this. Basically taking basic grammar course, and before and after was a before and after questionnaire, and I actually took the same questions and I mixed them all up and slightly changed them so that it was the same test at the beginning and same test at the end. It just mixed up in a different order so that they couldn't recognize it, right? So they wouldn't know. And I had different versions of it so that no one could actually say, "Oh, we cheated," right? There was no way to cheat but I was mixed up enough that they didn't know. And the whole goal was to see what was their improvement. But you got to make sure that when you're doing these tests or these surveys or these questionnaires, that you're doing it so it's always getting the results of the negative to positive in the same order on the questions. Because sometimes you can create questions that are actually asking the question in the opposite way, and then the answer is that's going to create a negative response compared to a positive response based on the question, right? So I had to ask all the questions in a certain way so that you would always get the results in a certain order, with all of the 1 to 5 or the 1 to 10 being in the same order for all of the questions. So you wouldn't get this opposite stuff affecting. And that's really important when you're evaluation grids, because you can really shoot down things. Because your whole goal of doing evaluations is that you want to sometimes you want to cross-validate things. And you want to see if you want to ask a question, you ask a question. Sometimes it's good to ask a lot of questions, so that in the end you actually have 2 or 3 or 4 questions that all treat the same topic without saying that they're treating the same topic, because you want to see if you just missed it the wrong time. The one time was one, the person who gets it. But if you get 3 or 4 different questions about the same topic or same way of the same reference or whatever you want to call those things, you want to see if there's a majority of them that are going in one direction or they're all going in another direction, right? So this is the really important thing for evaluation criteria and doing these things that have scales. They have scales from 1 to 3, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to 20, whatever, 1 to 100. They're all going to have these scales, and you just want to make sure they all kind of fit, right? So that's something you got to be really careful. I'm just saying here, we got to be careful when you're doing these that they are all going in the same direction, right? The questions are all from negative to positive or from positive to negative, and they're always going to have the same answers in the same direction plus and minus, so that you don't have this mixture, which causes problems later on doing your results and doing the analysis of it. So that's a really important one here, and I'll stop there in this one and get to the next video about how to do some of these things about measuring quality.